The events of the past few days in both the States and here at home have left me shaken. I've been shaken by the fact that racism, including overt lethal brutality, still rears its ugly head with such frequency. I've been shaken by the fact that such racism is not the exclusive purview of our neighbours to the south. It surfaces here in Canada with far too much frequency. I say that as a human rights lawyer who became a parliamentarian to continue the work I was always committed to, fighting inequality. But I also say that as a brown-skinned Muslim man who at times has been on the receiving end of discrimination and anti-Muslim sentiment. But also as someone who plainly recognizes that Indigenous and Black folks in this country have had it and continue to have it far worse than I ever have. Anti-Indigenous discrimination and anti-Black racism are unfortunately alive and well in Canada today, and hatred targeted toward these and other communities has only been exacerbated during the current COVID-19 pandemic. I think understanding the pernicious impact of and prevalence of racism is critical to understanding why thousands gathered on Saturday in the city at Christie Pitts to object to the needless death of Regis Korchinski-Paquet on Wednesday of last week. To understand why over 6,000 people have now either called or emailed my office about Regis's death in only the last 5 days. We don't know exactly what caused her death or who is ultimately responsible for her death. All of that is currently under investigation. What we do know is that a Black woman fell to her death from an apartment balcony in High Park, the community that I'm privileged to represent in Parliament. She lived in a building run by Toronto Community Housing, a building which I've been inside countless times as the locally elected representative, where I've spoken to tenants about their situation, about their need for income security, their need for supports to help them ensure that they have enough food to eat. A building where I've witnessed firsthand how prevalent addiction and mental health concerns are for low-income members of our community. A building like so many public housing buildings in this city, where many of the tenants are racialized, like Regis. And in her case, the very last people to see this Black woman alive were police officers called to assist her by her own mother. And that's enough to trigger anger and to arouse intense suspicion. Because too often in this country, particularly in this city, we have seen the deaths of racialized people, particularly Black and Indigenous Canadians, following interactions with law enforcement, where instead of de-escalating a mental health crisis, with police on the scene, we've witnessed an escalation of violence, with sometimes lethal results. It's an unacceptable state of affairs, but I also think it's sad. It's sad for our law enforcement officials, the vast majority of whom serve the public with incredible distinction and incredible courage. It's sad for those who are quick to presume the worst, that is, police complicity, because it reveals how eroded the bond of trust has become, how little faith and confidence people now have. While I have no doubt we must get answers quickly to what caused Regis's death, in fact, I think the answer to that question is secondary. More importantly, her needless death has already laid bare the damage which is already there for all of us to see. That systemic racism over decades and centuries against Black and Indigenous people in this country has eroded the very foundations which we are supposed to be able to rely upon. Things like law enforcement serving and protecting all of us, regardless of our color, our accent, our appearance. How many times have I heard Black friends and colleagues in the past 5 days observing events taking place around the continent utter the simple phrase, "That could have been me," or more sadly, "That could have been my child." The example of Regis in Toronto, the examples of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many others in the United States plainly illustrate the fact that we have a tremendous amount of work to do to root out racism. But that starts with confronting it and calling it out, particularly here in Canada, where we are far too willing to label racism, particularly anti-Black racism, a Southern phenomenon. The term racist is really not uttered in polite company in Canada, and that self-righteousness has got to end. It's an old adage because it's true. You can't address a problem unless you have the guts to name the problem. So as an elected leader for a community that is hurting after Regis's needless death, I know I can't provide an answer as to exactly what happened on the evening of May 28th. But I do know that I can at least help to address the aftermath and the source of the anger and frustration by naming it. We have a problem with racism in this city, this country, and this continent. We have to be blunt about it, not just with ourselves, but with each other. Will that make for some difficult conversations with your coworkers, your peers, your colleagues, your relatives, and your friends? Absolutely. Will that result in some difficult soul-searching, as we dare to acknowledge that even the most progressive among us are nevertheless part of the problem that fuels systemic racism in Canada? Yes, it will. But collectively, we must have the courage to confront racism if we are ever to hope to have the chance to overcome it.